Okay, great. So moving to the cloud, why the urgency? We've talked for a long time, and I've been working with partners and with customers for about 10 years, and there's always been, since the cloud actually became a thing, there's always been this hype about why we're going to move to the cloud, and the draw to the cloud has been for financial reasons or for the ease of use, the ability to turn things up and down. But as you guys can expect, right now, within the last few months, this has become not just a nice to have thing, but the cloud has become really the only solution for a lot of businesses, not just in the US, but across the world. Of course, we're talking about the pandemic. Right now, everybody is impacted in one way or the other. Most businesses, upwards of 70% were being reported as having to go to a completely remote workforce. And so people are looking for solutions to stay in business, to keep their workers active, and try to get through this thing. And it's really driven home the need for something that's very flexible. The main drivers as we look at this are controlling spending. Right now, I think everybody has the same question, when will this thing end? As we go through and we get, more reports and, different mandates and ordinances on the local side as well as the federal side, we're not sure how long this is going to last. And so people are starting to tighten their purse strings a little bit, trying to make sure that they are controlling their spending as they get through. And this is a perfect scenario for the cloud. Something that's more predictable, something that what your spending is going to be. Of course, everybody has started to work from home, and so having an environment that allows you to work from home, work from really anywhere, has become not just a nice to have thing, but it's become a requirement. You can't stay in business if you can't get to your data, if you can't get to your resources, and again, this is making more and more people turn to the cloud. And then the ability to scale resources up and down. It was reported by Microsoft that Azure resources over the last 9 weeks when this pandemic hit, Azure resources have gone up 775% just in those 9 weeks. And the reason is people are having to look for other ways to do business. They can't come into the office. They can't have their workers in a data center or in the normal places that they work. And so things like Office 365, Google Cloud, Azure, all those resources are being hit extremely hard. The good news is that all those cloud providers were already in place for that. Because they inherently are scalable, they've been able to handle that influx, which is really different from what we've had reported from customers that are not 100% in the cloud or that rely on on-premise resources. We've had reports of people having to, increase the number of firewalls, increase the number of VPN head-end devices, as well as increase their remote workforce through the sale of laptops and VPN licensing, remote desktop clients and VDI clients. So that scale is really, it's unprecedented right now. And this has become really a critical piece of doing business in an age where we don't know when we can return to a normal business and a normal workplace. So we're going to talk about a few of these things. Predictable budgets. Many companies who are still working with legacy or traditional on-prem equipment, they're having to make capital expenditures to procure that equipment. Even if they do something like a lease, those things are not as predictable as a cloud model. So especially in times like we're going through right now, an OpEx model really becomes attractive, and it becomes necessary in order to get through a time when we don't know what our revenue is going to be, when people are cutting back budgets, halting projects, halting new business because they're just trying to survive this downturn. Something like an unplanned infrastructure expense is something that would cripple businesses. We have a customer who is a municipality. They just had to spend close to $100,000 on laptops for a workforce that they weren't expecting to send home, as well as increase their VPN licensing. And those kind of things for small businesses can crush you. And so we're really seeing people with more interest in the cloud, and those who have a little bit of infrastructure in the cloud are looking to increase that. And those who have not been in the cloud, we're getting more and more people ask about, how do we get over the hump? How do we make an actual plan to get there? And of course, the ability to scale up and down. I mentioned what Microsoft reported their numbers to be. We're seeing people that are already in the cloud take advantage of the pay-as-you-go model, turning down resources that are not necessarily needed, slowing down their DevOps operations and their lab infrastructure in favor of turning up front-end servers and worker-facing services and applications. So having that ability is something you can't do on-prem. You can't easily scale down your equipment. You can go up, but then you have the issues of procurement and design, installation, all those things that take time and take money. Those things happen very easily in the cloud, and so we're seeing that people are not only interested in it, but they're really seeing this as a critical piece of their business plan right now. We talked a little bit about remote workers and how crazy it is right now that so much of, at least in the United States, so much of the workforce is home. If you drive down streets where there are business complexes, every parking lot is just about empty. So workers need the ability to work from home or wherever they are if they're quarantined, and the cloud is the perfect platform for that. Having everything accessible from the internet makes this a no-brainer. It's inherent to the design, and so this is something that, again, has become a critical piece of doing business right now. When you're working from anywhere, when your workforce is remote, tools like what we're using right now, the ability to have video conferencing, voice over IP, WebEx calls, these things are extremely important to maintain communication with your team and with your workers. Again, this is inherent to the cloud. It's not necessarily a built-in feature when you're talking about on-prem. Although these tools are available in on-prem and physical deployments, these are things that people have been doing in the cloud for years, and it's much easier to have these things in place, put these things in place, scaling up and down, whatever the case may be, moving along from a cloud platform. And then keeping data secure. We hear a lot about security in the cloud. People historically have been nervous about moving to the cloud because of the security, what they perceive as security risks. But we also see that people who are, we'll say, quote unquote, born in the cloud, they never have that situation where their workers are physically taking data from their resources. So in cloud scenarios, it's much easier to have your data viewable, but centrally located. And so a lot of people are building their security policies around that model. And so while it is, there still is the need to put security measures in place and to adjust your security policies, that becomes something that's very flexible and very easy to do in the cloud. That may be a little bit more of a struggle when people have physical access to your resources. So as people are moving more remote work and doing things, from a work anywhere model, these things are a little bit easier and a new way of doing things. And then scalable resources. We mentioned the increase in resources seen in Microsoft Azure, but that's across the board. Rackspace has gone up, AWS has gone up. These are things that people needed immediately. When everybody was sent home, those resources took a huge hit. Businesses that didn't have the infrastructure in an on-prem data center have taken over and moved things to the cloud. This is how they're keeping the lights on. We mentioned that some people we've seen turning down other resources. They're really taking advantage of and seeing how they can stay in business by increasing the resources as needed. Again, when you think about the way that COVID hit the U.S., this has really been since the end of January that action started to take place, and it's of course ramped up over the last few weeks here. But in that time, as we see these increases in resources, it's happened so fast that there's no way people could have made those sort of increases with on-prem infrastructure. So the reduced deployment time for new resources and new ways of doing business is unprecedented. People who have already been in the cloud for a long time, they know that it's easy to turn services up, turn services down. But in times where this is critical to your business, you can see that cloud is really the only solution to keeping these things going. And then, of course, decreasing as needed as well. Unfortunately, we've also seen where people have had to reduce their workforces. 3.2 million people lost their jobs in 1 week. Never has happened before. In an on-prem solution, when you have physical resources, that's a sunk cost. That's something that you cannot get your money back from. It's already spent. So in times when things are having to be reduced, and unfortunately that's a reality of what we're dealing with today, the cloud makes it easy to decrease resources and then keep that in reserve until it's time to start spinning things back up. So the pay-as-you-go model is really what's keeping people in business in a lot of cases. And again, this has become a critical piece of doing business. It's something that is not a nice to have anymore, but it's really the only way to survive these kind of times where business is unpredictable and we don't know how to get past or how fast it's going to take, how soon we're going to be able to get past this pandemic. So the question comes up, if you're not already in the cloud, how do you take advantage of these resources and how do you build a good strategy? That answer is, unfortunately, it depends. A lot of people have already started making a migration to the cloud, taking advantage of different apps like Salesforce or Office 365 and bits and pieces here and there. And that's one of the beauty, one of the nice things about the cloud is that you don't have to jump in head first and do everything all at once. But building a solid cloud migration strategy is the key to having a successful deployment. So it starts off with a business case, right? I put my own goals up here first. So, grow business, cut costs, and hopefully save some money. And then, of course, I want to build that time machine that I started. So create your business case. What do you think that the cloud can do for you? What is the challenge that you're trying to fix? It could be that you're just trying to be more agile, more flexible, and have the ability to scale up and down. It could be that you're trying to save money or get to a predictable monthly spend rather than the unexpected costs of infrastructure projects. But you have to document what what challenges you hope to fix, or what business objectives you hope to meet by going to the cloud. And then once you have an idea of what that looks like, how much and how fast is a critical part to that project plan. How much? It could be that you decided that you want everything in the cloud. GSI is I'd say we're about 99% in the cloud, and it would be a monumental task for us to move everything that we have to an on-prem solution. We're very remote. We're very, very cloud-oriented. But if we were to do that, what we have in the cloud now, moving from an on-prem solution, that would probably take, I would say, a year to 2 years to do that kind of move for the size of our company. And so you have to evaluate for yourself how much you want to move, and then how fast can you do it. Many people try to do too much and too fast, and even if they have a solid plan, sometimes it's just too much for the company to absorb. And so you need to look at what challenges might be experienced. We'll talk a little bit in a second here about some of the things that we've seen, but there are challenges that you know you're going to experience, and then what we've seen from our perspective is there's a lot of challenges that you're not going to be able to foresee. The unexpected happens on every single project, whether that's an incompatibility with a service, or something that is a legacy app that has to be upgraded before you can move, or maybe it's even just a cultural thing that one team just can't get their group ready in time, and so these things get delayed, and those end up being real dollars spent trying to get your team moved to the cloud. So building a business case, building that plan includes these three major topics. And then of course, if you're not on the executive team, you're going to want to be able to present, what is this going to cost? And if you are on the executive team, you're going to be very interested in, what is this going to save me, or what is this going to cost me? If you look at AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, you'll find pretty readily available tools that are designed to help you evaluate the cost of ownership, the TCO. Unfortunately, a lot of those tools are looking at a small subset of what the actual cost is, because it's not just your compute resources. If you've got 100 servers that service your company right now, and those are file servers and web servers, and you've got your HR stuff, all that is one thing, and moving them to a virtual environment in the cloud is part of that cost. So you've got compute, you've got networking, which includes more than just what's on-prem. It's not just your switches and routers, but it's also your bandwidth. And yet those bandwidth costs change a lot when you're working completely remotely. When all of your resources are in the cloud, people are going to access it from other places, and your networking becomes critical to having a solid and consistent work experience. Storage is a big cost in the cloud. When you're on-prem, you see those costs. They're very tangible. You see the hardware that's storing all your data. You see the backup tapes coming in and out. When it's in the cloud, it's very easy to lose track of and manage that, and storage becomes a huge component. And it's one of the things that's most expensive to manage in the cloud. You've got labor. On-prem, you have people that maintain your servers, that maintain your network, that act as your help desk team. It's who you go to when things break. It's who keeps the things going. They do the patching and all that. When you move to the cloud, that shifts a little bit, and that labor, especially at the beginning, looks like migration and project costs. And so as you're looking to migrate, there's the ongoing piece and how that changes, but also the migration piece. And so if you're doing that in-house, that cost is something that has to be calculated. Things like power and cooling and the real estate that houses your equipment today, those things are very tangible, real costs that are not necessarily easily recoup if you move to the cloud. If you were building a new building and you had the choice up front, you could save those things by not investing in space for physical hardware, or if you don't have that already, and maybe you're co-located with a co-location provider, rack space or something like that, those things can be recouped, but that goes into the total cost of ownership. Education and culture. Education, because people have to understand that doing business in the cloud is not exactly the same as doing it with on-prem equipment. The way that we access resources, the way that we move things around, our security policies, how we view data, and how we keep that to ourselves, all those things are different and need to be updated. And so it's an education process for your team, not just the IT group who may be responsible for maintaining this, but also for the users who are accessing the data and are trying to keep that secure. And when we talk about culture, we've seen a lot of projects that have been delayed because certain groups are maybe not quite ready to go to the cloud. They either need a little bit more hand-holding, they need to be convinced of the security, whatever the case may be. The culture is a very important piece of your total cost of ownership and of your migration plan. How you get the teams ready to go to the cloud, is really dependent on how accepting they are that they're not going to actually see a tangible piece of equipment with blinking lights in the closet there. So some of the challenges that we've seen, and we've seen a lot, people that jump in very quickly maybe don't have the everything thought through, and then so when things that are unforeseen that everybody deals with, when those come up, they can really be devastating to a cloud project. One of the first things, we talked about culture. This can be very detrimental to your project if your team's not ready, and because you have a timeline that equates to dollars. You want to make sure that you've got buy-in from your executive team and from your technical team, and that the users are ready to do business in this way, and that it's going to meet the objectives that you're trying to accomplish. Biting off too much, doing too much too fast. Earlier we talked about some customers that are taking pieces of the cloud. They're doing a little bit with maybe Office 365, or maybe they're doing some applications in the cloud, something like Salesforce, or along those lines. Companies that go and they decide they want to have everything in the cloud all at once, it's often more than they can handle, especially when they have a stringent timeline. If you've been working with legacy equipment and infrastructure, and you have to move that to a virtualized environment, it can also be very costly as you do those migrations. Data in and data out, in a lot of cases, becomes a big expense. And so sort of planning for those things and doing them at a tolerable pace becomes important in mitigating your challenges and your pitfalls. System dependencies. As you probably already know, we are a J.D. Edwards shop, and we do a lot of our consulting. A lot of our customers come from the ERP space, and those types of applications that are very complex have a lot of dependencies that have to be evaluated. If you're looking at moving a major application that has front-end servers and database servers and fat clients and all these different components, all that needs to be thought about before moving to the cloud. And sometimes it's not an issue at all, that you've maintained your patches, you've maintained your updates and your tool sets. But a lot of times people have been slow about maintaining those legacy systems. And so a lot of that work has to be done on the front end before moving to the cloud. Or because the dependent systems have not been thought through, things get broken when people move some pieces and not the others. So it's very important to be thorough and to make sure that you've thought through your application and data flows. You have all those dependencies in place before you move into the cloud, before you build that plan. Of course, education. You probably already know how to run your equipment on prem. You know what your applications are. You know what your tools are. Those may change a little bit as you move to the cloud. And so having a good handle on what it's going to look like when you get to AWS or Azure or OCI or any of those, understanding how to maintain those systems, how to navigate the portals, how to work with the tools, all those things become very important because they don't look the same. If you look at networking, for example, in the cloud, a VLAN doesn't look like a VLAN. A firewall doesn't look like a firewall. And each cloud provider has their own nomenclature that represents the same things that we're doing in your data center. So being educated, understanding what you're getting into up front is a huge piece to making sure that you have a successful plan. Monitoring and alerting. We've seen this overlooked so many times, and it surprises me still, but a lot of people are under the impression that if you're going to a cloud provider, that they're going to monitor and alert when systems go down or when there's a problem. And they will monitor and alert when their systems go down and there's a problem. But the monitoring and alerting that goes on with your systems, your Windows machine or your Linux machine, that is not usually included with cloud service providers. And so making sure that you've got a good monitoring and alerting system, a way of ticketing or managing those incidents and problems is critical to a good plan, a good cloud strategy. Those things shouldn't be overlooked, and they're part of normal everyday maintenance and management of any network, any data system. So we see those things overlooked often, and that can really destroy your cloud strategy. And of course, ongoing support and maintenance. When you have a physical machine, it's sometimes obvious that you have to sometimes go in and do things to it. You have to do patching, and you have to maybe update firmware or adjust the configuration when you add something. Those things are obvious on site, but when it's in the cloud, sometimes that kind of is out of sight, out of mind. But that ongoing support is critical to keeping your business running, to keeping those systems up. There's still patching that has to be done. There's still configuration changes that have to be done and testing that has to be done. So all of that is critical for any environment. And just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that those things go away. So including that in your plan and in your business case, understanding what those costs look like, understanding how that labor changes moving forward is critical to a good plan. And we hear all the time, what about my IT staff? So many times when we're talking to the technical side of a company, we get hesitation talking about the cloud because people feel like they're going to be replaced by a robot or by the cloud provider, and that's not really the case. IT is a huge piece of any business these days, but it does change a little bit. In talking to Gartner, we see how numbers have changed over the last few years. So from 2014 to 2018, certain pieces stay about the same. If you look at these top numbers here, the management and the finance, the admin of IT, it hasn't really changed very much. In 5 years, it's gone from 13% to 12%. If you look at application support, it hasn't changed dramatically. It's gone up, if anything, and that's because the applications are still, that is the heart of the business. Those are what that keeps you going. What has gone down is really your data center work. These other things like DevOps, application development, voice and data networking, all those things stay about the same. Those things are still critical regardless of where your equipment is. And so planning for your team, adjusting for what what the new business model looks like is also critical to this plan. Knowing that things do change, and the job that you have today may look a little bit different tomorrow, doesn't mean that it goes away. And so your team shouldn't be necessarily afraid of going to the cloud. It doesn't mean jobs are being cut. It really means that their job is going to take on a new look. It may have some more application side to it, but it's really a new challenge, and it's something that will keep the business going. So these are the main things that we see that go into a business plan for the cloud. These are the things that are critical to think about as we're getting through the challenges that we see through the pandemic right now. Many customers are calling us for advice on how to enable their remote staff. Many of them are looking for scaling up very quickly, and all these things are critical, but they're also very easy when you're in the cloud already. Moving to the cloud is a challenge, and again, planning is the biggest piece to that. Making sure that you understand the cost, understand what the cloud can do for you, and where you get benefits and where there are also cons. Obviously, everything is not perfect. So that's our presentation for today. Brooke, I'll turn that back over to you for questions or next comments.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Josh. Let me know when you can see my screen.
There we go.
All right, perfect. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Josh. Sorry, I was just getting this all set up here. Thank you for your great presentation. I just want to cover a few follow-up items before we get into our question and answer portion of our webcast. All right, our webcast today is part of our free ongoing educational webcast series on J.D. Edwards. And our upcoming webcasts are currently listed on the screen. We are adding more every day, so make sure you go out to getgsi.com/JD Edwards webcast to view our most up-to-date schedule. And we have erptalk.com, which is a problem-solving forum where you can get your J.D. Edwards and other enterprise applications questions answered. And make sure to stay connected with us on social media. All of our handles are currently listed on the screen. And you can see our most up-to-date posts on webcasts, events, industry insights, and much more. And we also provide extensive free educational resources for the J.D. Edwards community, including our weekly educational webcasts, our monthly newsletter, our online resource center, and we also offer on-site and virtual workshops. Now, if you'd like to sign up for our weekly email reminders or our upcoming webcasts or our monthly newsletter, go to getgsi.com, go to resources and events on the main menu, and just click J.D. Edwards on the right-hand side, and then you'll be able to view those resources. All right, Josh, it looks like we do have a couple questions here. And before I get into that, I just want to remind you that if you would still like to submit a question, you can do so through the questions panel. It's located on the bottom of the GoToWebinar console window. And if you minimize your screen, just click the orange left-facing arrow key to redisplay your console. All right, Josh, our first question is from Robin, and Robin asks, does being in the cloud allow for any customization?
Yeah, depending on what which services you're consuming, the cloud is probably more customizable than it is if you were, had an equivalent infrastructure in the on-prem. More customizable because you have the ability to scale up and down really easily. There are some things that are not as easy to customize, or not as granular, I should say. For example, most cloud providers they have certain sizes of compute resources. So you might get a 2 CPU server with 4 gig of RAM, and the next one is 4 CPU and 8 gig of RAM, but maybe not anything in between. So finding the right resources and finding the flexibility that you want may be a little bit of work, but the flexibility of the cloud is and the customizable features are really endless. It's more scalable and probably easier to scale than any on-prem solution.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And our next question is from Roger, and he says, what does the Gartner report mean by data center?
Yeah, so that report is talking about really what the IT staff looks like in the more heavily the cloud is used. And data center is really referring to the physical maintenance of server and compute. You'll notice that the other numbers like networking and voice, those numbers stayed very close to the same. Data center took a little bit of a drop because those things aren't necessarily there anymore. There's not physical hardware that needs to have firmware updated, hard drives replaced, that kind of thing. So it's really looking at that type of service, rack and stack, and those other pieces, application maintenance, app and development, as well as networking. Those are about the same, and on the development side and application side, those actually go up.
Okay, great. And our next question is from Donna, and Donna said, can you explain why the cloud would be better for keeping data secure?
Yeah, in and of itself, I would say the cloud is not necessarily inherently more secure, but when you've got your data viewable and it's in a central location, there's a lot more control that is inherent, and so rather than physically accessible on-prem, so it's really more of a how easy to secure than just inherently secure by itself. It sort of opens a topic or another discussion that we just had a webcast on recently on how to maintain cybersecurity now that you're remote, and I'd encourage you to look out on our website to find that one where we talked about that. But it opens up the door for a change in our security policies and really drives home the point that that those policies need to be adapted to how we do business today. So as we move to a remote infrastructure, as we move to more cloud participation, when that is more prolific, our security policies need to change, and a lot of times those are more flexible because of being in the cloud. But they do need to be looked at thoroughly to make sure that they align with our business objectives.
Okay, great. And we have one more question here. And the question is from Mark, and he said, why do you include culture as a part of TCO?
Yeah, so when we look at total cost of ownership, we look at not just the ongoing monthly costs that are incurred by cloud, but also what does it take to get to the cloud. And so a lot of that comes from migration and the adoption from different teams. So if a business unit is not ready to go to the cloud, we've seen numerous times that delays are caused in the project, and those equate to real dollars when it comes to the migration project, as well as if those things are not considered up front, or maybe they're considered but they need to be revisited. Sometimes it's in the terms of education or getting the team reacquainted with terms and policies and procedures that may be a little different in the cloud. So all those things go into certainly the plan for moving to the cloud, but also that that comes out to the total cost of ownership, as well as when you'll see return on investment. So having those things taken care of up front, making sure that your business is ready and that culture is ready to adopt those that new way of doing business, having that done up front usually means a lower total cost of ownership and a quicker return on investment when you're moving to the cloud.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you, everybody, for your questions today. As a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access a copy of today's recording, as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card. Anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. And if you have any follow-up questions for Josh or myself, our contact info is currently listed on the screen. And again, thank you so much, Josh, today for your presentation, and everybody for attending. And we hope that you all stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.